Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Nantucket Short-Term Rentals Work Group Public Input Session. Thank you all for being on time. We're going to give people a little bit of time to catch up. So I know people are still just joining. So let's just give it a couple of minutes. Welcome, those of you who are just joining. We're just going to give people a couple of minutes to come on in the room and then we will get started. Hello, everyone who's just joining. We're just gonna wait for the avalanche of new people to slow and then we'll get started. All right. All right. Well, let's get started then. Welcome, everyone. This is a public input session being sponsored by the Nantucket Short-Term Rentals Work Group. So I know people are still continuing to join, but we're just going to get started to honor everybody's time. So our meeting objectives tonight are to share the draft policy ideas with the public, the short-term rental working group, and to elicit input from stakeholders about, and the public, about the short-term rental working group's proposals in progress. So as we will repeat throughout this meeting, the policies that the short-term rental working group is looking at are still in draft, and that is deliberate. We are having this meeting while things are still very much under discussion. And so that is the point. And that is why we want your input, and that why your input is really important and relevant at this time. So here is our agenda for tonight. I see that we still have a lot of people joining, so I'm just going to pause for a second here. We had a.
No, I don't want. No, I don't want to be on.
Wait, we had a slowdown in entry, and now we have lots of people still coming in. All right.
So John Green just dialed in.
All right, so please do mute yourselves while we are in the full group. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you wish, but do mute yourself. So our agenda tonight. We are going to start with an overview of the progress and current policy ideas that the short-term rental working group has been looking at. And then we're going to launch into small group discussions. That's where we're going to spend all of our time. The groups will be roughly 8 people in a room, and a facilitator. Some of the groups will have facilitators from the working group, but since we have way more people than we have working group members to divide up, we will ask for some volunteers to facilitate and take notes in these breakout groups, but we'll get into that as we go. And you'll have about an hour in your small working groups, maybe a little bit more. And then we will come back together at the end just to take a little poll and see where people are on these policy elements. And it's really a straw poll just to give us a sense. We know this is not a scientific group here. This is a group of the willing who wanted to be here. But it just gives us, and it gives the working group just a good sense of sort of what people are thinking after having engaged with their conversations. And we will end promptly by 8 p.m. So I want to offer these ground rules as suggestions for how we can have a constructive meeting here together. I ask just 3 things. First, try to be constructive. This is an opportunity for you to help shape what the working group is going to end up proposing. So share your thoughts, share your ideas, right? Be constructive. You can certainly say things you don't like, but also say what you do like or what you would like to see instead. The more constructive the feedback, the more helpful it's going to be for the working group. Secondly, I do request that everybody be respectful and civil to each other and in the way that you talk about other people. So we like to say you can be hard on the problem and soft on the people, right? So do be respectful, speak about each other and other people in the way that you yourself would like to be spoken about and to. But do feel free to share points of disagreement. Just do it in a respectful way. And third, we ask you to try to be concise in your small groups. There will be 8 people. Not everyone necessarily wants to speak and participate, but we really want people to have the opportunity to do so. And so we are going to start with some time constraints around people's initial participation so that we make sure that everybody really gets a chance to speak. And we do ask you to be on topic. We really do want to focus in on proposals to address the goals that the working group is working toward. We're specifically interested in what you think of the proposals that they already have. And we're also open to hearing if you think there are additional or different policy suggestions that you want to put forward, that those are relevant as well. Okay. With that, I want to just give a brief history of what the short-term rental working group, where they come from and what they are trying to do, what they've been doing together before I get into the actual policy proposals that they are putting forward. So I think as many or most of you know, the short-term rental working group came about from a town meeting suggestion vote back in 2022. As an approach to resolve divergent approaches to addressing short-term rentals that came out of citizen petition or town suggestions to town meeting. And so a group was put together of different town bodies, representatives from different town bodies to select the members of the working group, as well as to hire Consensus Building Institute as facilitators for that effort. And so myself, Stacy Smith, and my colleague Samin have been asked by the town to serve as facilitators for the working group. And that is what we have been doing since October, when we were brought on board, and then the working group was selected and launched. The mandate of the group, it is meant to be a diverse group with different points of view, and their goal is to agree on the data first, and also to seek consensus on approaches to addressing short-term rentals, regulating short-term rentals for the town, to supplement Article 39, which were the regulations that passed the health Board of Health article to create regulations, and then the Board of Health has created those regulations. And the timeline quickly became clear, was to work through the winter and spring to develop proposals for a fall special town meeting. And that is the timeline the group has been working toward. So here is the membership of the short-term rental working group. There were 3 at-large primary members and 1 alternate primary member. There's a planning board primary and alternate member, finance committee primary and alternate member. There's a primary and alternate representative of the advisory committee on non-voting taxpayers. There is a primary and alternate member from representing Act Now, as well as a primary and alternate representing Nantucket Together. And then there is just a primary member representing the affordable housing advocacy. And there was a non-voting designee from the Board of Health serving on the group, but she resigned in May, but she was present for much of the group's deliberations. And these members have been, part of their mandate was to show up to most or all meetings, and most and or all of them have done so. So we've had a very strong set of shared experiences together across all of the meetings that we have had. So very briefly, our process, right? We convened in October. We've met roughly every other week. We had a few hiatuses at different times, but roughly every other week, mostly for 3 to 4 hours, in addition to a couple of longer in-person meetings, 2 of them on island where most, if not all of the members were able to attend, and multiple subgroup meetings throughout the process. During that time, we started off developing and agreeing to some internal operating protocols to promote constructive deliberations. With a few exceptions, the group agreed to all of those. We developed some policy goals, and we've been refining those goals as we go. So that's been a real iterative process. We started off with some very broad goals, and we've really started over time to narrow in on a much more specific set of policy goals that we will share with you tonight. We have also iteratively developed and defined data questions that the group really wanted to get answered. And then we worked with the town to request and bring on board an independent data consultant process first to compile and clean and analyze STR data in an iterative way with the committee. So coming back to the committee with initial data, asking more questions, how they want that framed, going back and analyzing that data and bringing it back to the committee. And that process will continue. We held an initial public meeting in December 2022, where we got a lot of input from conversations just about, how people experience STRs in their communities, how they use STRs, how they offer them themselves. And so I think that was a really helpful starting point of public input. And then throughout the spring, the winter and spring, the group has been brainstorming and exploring a range of different potential STR policy elements or mechanisms or levers that they could use as potential policies, potential bylaw pieces to try and address the goals that they were iteratively developing. And really looking at, well, what would these levers do? What might they do that we aren't expecting? What would we hope they would be doing? And then discussing in depth and narrowing down. They also heard from some other communities and did some additional research on what are other communities faced with these challenges of STRs doing, knowing, of course, that every community is unique, and Nantucket is especially unique in the way that they use and apply STRs. But nevertheless, learning from other communities, the group has found quite helpful. And as I said, they've had several iterations of presentations about data, particularly at this stage, about data from the platforms, but with a little bit of understanding so far about the data from the realty companies on Nantucket, and knowing that information, being prepared to integrate that information when it is available to the group, which is, I think, expected in about a week from now, a week and a little bit from now. And then a lot of conversations back and forth with town council and planning consultants to make sure that they really were looking at what are the legal and planning and zoning questions and implications of these, so that we really make sure that we are thoughtful, right, about putting together policies that are really going to achieve what we want them to achieve, that are legal, that are thoughtful, that are implementable, all of those things. And then they have now been drafting over the last month or so, drafting and refining a draft set of bylaws and policies for public review. And that's where we are tonight. So the data presentations are available, and all of our meeting agendas and meeting summaries, which were written, our meeting summaries are written, differently than you might see a typical town public meet or a town committee. They are really meant to be readable for people who did not attend the meeting. So that you can follow along. We do focus on ideas and not necessarily on individuals. So we don't name who said what in our meeting summaries, but all of that is available in our recordings that are also all available on the website. So to get into what I wanted to do on data tonight, we could have spent the whole 2 hours if we wanted to actually share out the data the group has heard so far. So instead, we just wanted to name for you the data points that the group has been examining, so that sort of what ideas, what points have been going behind the thinking that they are putting forward for you today. And any interest you have in digging into the data, that data is all, those presentations are all available on the website. So just to name, of great interest is, what are the total number of STR listings? And the group has looked at that from the state registry and change over time. And they've looked at that as what they know from the active listings on platforms and through NAREB partners. So that data has been looked at by the group. They've also looked at a bed and an occupancy analysis of the short-term rentals that have been listed on platforms. They've looked at how those things have changed over time. They've looked at a rough mapping of short-term rental locations based on platform data, but that data has not been very specific because of privacy limitations. So it's been more of a heat map to just show general locations. They looked at estimated weekly short-term rental revenue from platforms over time to get a little bit of a sense of the direct economic impacts of short-term rentals. They've looked at the nights booked per week, the contract lengths, and the changes to those things on platforms over time. And they've also looked at the estimates of percentages of ownership, particularly those who own more than one, and the number that are owner occupied. And again, those numbers are rough. And some of these, as you've seen, the ones that say on platforms, and this one here is also on platforms, are prior to getting the data from NAREB. So the group knows where they expect some of the data numbers they've seen to change based on what they expect to see from NAREB, but they will have a more complete set of data, including the data from NAREB, from the real estate agents on companies going forward. Okay, so now let me name for you, these are the purposes that the group has currently come to for what they are hoping that their mechanisms are going to achieve. They would like to protect the traditions and the traditional ways of home rental on Nantucket, and they want to preserve the economic opportunities for the people who use short-term renting to keep their homes now and into the future. That will allow these members of your community to stay and to afford to live either full-time or part-time on Nantucket. They want to avoid the adverse impacts on the local economy that might come from a sudden loss of existing short-term rental revenue, or from the taxes that brings to the town, or from the visitor spending that brings to local businesses. They want to prohibit additional corporate ownership of residential properties that are exclusively being operated for profit as short-term rentals rather than as housing for either full-time or part-time residents. They want to limit the conversion of residential units to short-term rentals, which has really negatively affected removing residential units from available year-round rental housing stock. And they really want to create a regulatory structure that reduces the threat of litigation challenge to both part-time and full-time residents who use their homes for short-term rentals. So those are the goals that the group is trying to meet. Draft goals, I should say, right? Because all of this is iteratively changing. So if in your group you want to discuss those goals, you should also feel free to do that. Okay, so these are their initial policy proposals that we really are going to be asking you to weigh in on tonight. So there are two pieces to their proposal. There's really three pieces. The first two pieces being the essential ones we want to talk about tonight. The first one is a general bylaw that would contain all of the following or any of the following provisions. And we just want to name clearly that there is a general bylaw and there is a zoning bylaw. Both are being proposed. And neither would go into effect without the passage of the other, right? So that is the expectation, that any of these general bylaw provisions would be matched with the zoning bylaw provisions and vice versa. So these are the provisions that the group has been exploring. The first is that they would limit every owner or operator of a short-term rental, any owner, they would limit to one short-term rental unit, right? So people going forward would be only able to rent, any owner would be able to rent one short-term rental. The second provision is that dwelling units owned by a corporation would not be eligible for short-term renting. So all short-term rentals would need to be owned by a natural person. Now, they might still be owned by a partnership or a trust or an LLC or an S corporation, as long as every member of those legal entities is traceable to a natural person. And this is because the group recognizes that many people use these legal vehicles really just as a way to own a family property. And they still are it's really still being held by a family or by real people. So that is the way that they would do this. And they would expect that the burden of proof would be on the people registering their units as short-term rentals. So they would need to demonstrate that they are owned by only natural persons. The third provision is that short-term rentals would not be allowed in units that are deed restricted for affordable or attainable housing. They would also want to limit the amount of short-term renting allowed in units that are particularly seen as potentially attainable housing, like apartment buildings, multifamily dwelling units, and townhouses. So those are the units called out right now as ones that would be allowed still to short-term rent, in order to make sure that people who live in those units might want to rent them in order to help offset their own costs of living there or of owning them, but that the limits would be 4 weeks per year, so that they would not be being used primarily or even in any large part as short-term rentals. The group is also suggesting that no short-term rental unit can change occupancy more than 9 times during the high season of July and August. So that is that that provision is meant to reduce the amount of churn in the high season, so that there would only be a maximum of 9 contracts allowed during that time. And then lastly, the group is proposing that these regulations apply going forward to new short-term rental applicants, and that those who have existing short-term rental certificates would be able to continue to engage in their short-term renting, even if they don't meet the above criteria, until the unit is transferred, conveyed, or otherwise not renewed. So if the certificates have to be renewed each year, if there's a year that they're not renewed, then that grandfathering, so to speak, would cease. And just to say, the reason the group is really considering that, there's a couple of reasons. One is that they really were concerned about the impacts on people who made some of these decisions to purchase property and use them in this way prior to these new rules. And they really don't want to see them suffer because the rules have been changed in mid-stride. The group has also been thoughtful. They've been advised by the town council about the concerns about lawsuits for any of these provisions, and that allowing existing short-term rental certificates to continue would dramatically reduce concerns about those lawsuits. So let me stop there and see, is there anyone on the working group that would like to correct me or clarify any of the points about these policy proposals? Okay.
Are you're asking for people who are members of the group to input?
Yes, I'm
right?
only asking
Yep.
for the members of the group to clarify if there's
Thanks.
anything. Yeah, thanks. All right. Moving on then to the zoning bylaw, which as I stated, would only take effect if the general bylaw is also passed, and the general bylaw would only take effect if this zoning provision also passes. And the zoning bylaw is quite simple. It is to add a definition of short-term rentals into the zoning bylaws for the town, and to then add short-term rentals to the use chart and indicate that it is permissible use in all districts except as regulated by the general bylaw, right? So the general bylaw would be where the regulations happen, rather than the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw would be the place where the legal clarity for those who do short-term rent would be established, right? But nothing about this zoning bylaw would stop the group from having the regulations in this general bylaw, right? So this zoning bylaw is not identical to the ones you have seen at town meeting before, because it explicitly regulates short-term rentals as indicated by the general bylaw. Anything my group wants to add? Okay.
Stacy, sorry, on the zoning, I would just say that it's definitely not unanimous.
Yes, none of these are
unanimous,
unanimous.
right?
Yes. Thank you, Julia.
And thank you.
Yeah, and I that is later in my slides to stress, but like none of this has been unanimously agreed yet by the group, but only it has been agreed by the group that we could bring this forward to the public at this moment, because this is where we are, right? And for discussion purposes only. Okay, I do want to name one additional set of provisions. So this is sort of a third category that the group has been discussing. And that is, these are sort of a la carte. So this would be general bylaws, but that would require one a majority vote, the other a 2/3 vote, that could go into effect with or without the general and zoning bylaw. And this is a 3% community impact fee, which is a legal vehicle established by the state that allows the town to establish a 3% fee on rent for properties that are not the primary owners, the owner's primary residence, if the owner has 2 or more short-term rentals, right? So this would apply if it passed, and if the general bylaw as currently present passed. This would only apply to those currently grandfathered short-term rentals, because going forward, no owner would be allowed to have 2 or more short-term rentals. But what this would be is that for those that would be 2 or more short-term rentals, it would add a 3% fee on each of those contracts. And The law requires that at least 35% of that fee must be dedicated to affordable housing or local infrastructure projects, and that the additional amount would be general fund revenue, unless you vote otherwise. And so that is this second vote that the group was suggesting, that actually you have 100% of the community impact fees dedicated to affordable housing or local infrastructure projects that would support housing. Because that would also just be a way that any of this money would then really be able to help the town address its affordable housing goals. Now, I shared those with you, but I do want to sort of name, those are not, we don't necessarily want to delve into those as much today, because they're a la carte. People could support them or not, they'll just go forward, and there's not that much wiggle room with them. You can maybe share your comments on those in our comment form, but we do want to try and focus most of the discussion, if we can, on the set of proposals that the group is most focused on trying to hone as a package for the group. So some caveats, right? These are only initial draft, and they are a work in progress. They do not represent a consensus of the group. The group has not sought consensus yet, and the group has begun exploring additional ideas as well. So this is not the only things that they've talked about. It's really just the things that were baked enough that the group felt ready to put them in front of the public tonight. And really, the group is really eager to hear your input, right? So this is an affirmative opportunity for you to help shape the direction that this goes going forward. So this is our small group discussion questions. What we want to do is get your thoughts on these policy elements, element by element, and we're also curious how you feel about the package as a whole. And by the package as a whole, we mean the zoning and general bylaw package that go together, not the community input, the community fee necessarily. But we do want to know, for each element, what do you like about this element? What concerns do you have about this element? And how might you add or improve it or the package as a whole? That is, if you have additional policies you would like to think through, those are available as well, right? And so Semanis just put that question in the chat. We will also put the policy elements into the chat for you to remember and take with you when we go into our small groups. So a couple quick words about our small group conversations. All of our short-term rental working group members are going to serve as small group facilitators, but there are more of you than there are of them. So you may be in a small group without a STR working group member. If that is the case, we ask that your first order of business is to select a facilitator and a note taker, right? We do ask you in your small groups, we're going to have small groups of roughly 8 people per group. We ask you to put on your video if that is workable and comfortable for your technology and for how you are feeling tonight. But it's really nice to try to create some dynamic as if we're in the room and we're full human beings and we're not just disembodied voices. If you don't have background noise, we're a small enough group, you could even turn off your mute and pretend you're in a room together, right? Active participation is voluntary. Feel free to go into your small group and just say, I'm here to listen. That's totally fine. We are not recording small groups, And we expect small group discussions to be about 60 minutes each. We'll send you a time check after about 30 minutes, and then again when you have 5 minutes left. And we will be putting a link in at the end of the meeting for you to put further individual comments. So this is not your only chance to get your comments heard. Your note taker is going to be taking not verbatim notes. They're really going to be trying to capture the gist of the ideas and discussions. So if you have comments that you want to make sure are heard verbatim, or are very specific, please feel free to use the individual comment forms, and the short-term rental working group and the public at large is going to have access to all of those comments. We do ask you to please follow those ground rules of being concise, being respectful, and being on point in your small groups and also in your comment forms, because those are going to be shared publicly. Facilitator's job, for those of you who are going to be picking your facilitators, really just to support those present to have a respectful and effective conversation. The note takers, we have a template for you. We are going to drop that template into the chat. It is a Word document. If you are comfortable being able to type into a Word document, note takers, while being in your conversations, we encourage you to use this template. The template goes policy by policy, not person by person. And we ask you to try and take those notes policy by policy, because we are going to try to, we meaning Sammanish, with some help from myself and colleagues, are going to try to synthesize all of this input in a really quick turnaround time so that we can, share it with the group and go forward constructively. So we do ask you to please be concise in your note taking. Do not tell us verbatim everything you're hearing, and to please go policy element by policy element. That said, we are going to invite you in your conversations to start with a round robin. Everybody get a chance to speak, so that we really make sure everybody does get a chance to speak. And then once we do that, you can ask follow-up discussion. You can go point by point. You can dig in a little bit further. After the breakout session, last time we sent you home immediately after. This time we want you to come back. We may save really more like 10 minutes because we do have a straw poll where we ask everybody to weigh in specifically on how you feel about these policy elements. So these small group conversations are really our qualitative conversations. And then we do want to try and end with a little bit of a quantitative test, just a feel for how people are seeing these issues. So please do come back. If you aren't going to participate in the small groups and you want to jump off and you don't even want to listen in, that's fine. Do come back at 7:50 or 7:45 so that you can participate in this straw poll, because we'd love to have your input on that. And then we're going to compile a synthesis, as we said, of just high point key ideas. And we're going to, I can go over some of our next steps after that. So again, these are our questions. With that, Sammanish is going to send us into our small groups, and we are going to see you back here in about an hour.
Stacy, could we get possible one point of clarification? I think it'd be very helpful for the breakout groups.
Sure.
Because the grandfathering concept is somewhat new to some of us who have not been in every meeting. Could you give a little bit of a clarification on the proposal of the working group regarding the grandfathering, like which points are included versus not? Like, it's obvious that you're saying that if someone owns multiple SDRs and has for years and years, that we're proposing to grandfather those in. But what about the other things like the July, August 7-day turnover, which is basically what 9 is going to turn out to be? Things like that.
Group can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that the grandfathering is meant to apply at the moment to all of the provisions, except the 9 times during July and August. I think the group would like that to apply to everybody equally.
Okay.
Am I saying that right, group?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll address my concerns in the workout group. I just wanted clarification.
Perfect.
Thanks.
All right.
Could you also clarify the one dwelling per owner?
Yes,
Someone with a house and a cottage on a single lot, is that 2 dwellings or 1 dwelling?
I think the group is describing that as one dwelling. So one of
So a
those
house-
would,
House and a cottage is 1 dwelling?
no, I think the group, sorry, the group is saying that the house is a dwelling and the cottage is a dwelling. So you would be able to short-term rent one of those 2,
Except if it exists now, it would be
except if it
grandfathered.
exists now, it would be
Right.
grandfathered. Exactly.
But if it were passed on later on, it would affect the situation, right?
Not if it was, yeah, if it was passed on to family, no. But if it was sold, yes.
Yes, right.
You-
Rick, do you have a
I think-
clarifying question? I want to get us into breakout groups soon, so,
Can I just have a quick question?
Yeah.
You mentioned that some of the, there was not a consensus of the group, but wasn't asked for in regard to the 2 things you were presenting us. What about the principles? General principles, was that the consensus of the group?
no, it is still a working process. Those are the objectives that the group has said that they are proceeding with, but we did not have a vote on those purposes.
And could I just ask one clarifying question?
Yes,
So it seems like the current slate of owners will be grandfathered and continue operate. So until there's a change there, to the extent that nuisance is an issue, other avenues would have to be taken. To what extent are you confident that the 1 property per owner and then the natural person clauses will prevent sort of
yeah, so I'm gonna
deal-making?
jump in here, David, because that's beyond a clarifying question. So I think feel free to raise those concerns with the group and raise the request to have the group talk more about that, but that's not something I can answer for you right now.
Okay.
Okay, I am going to, this is messy, but I'm gonna drop these provisions in the chat. So, and then Semanish, if you wanna, Rick, did you have a clarifying question?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank you. I think it might be helpful to let everybody know the process. If these all go through, for example, what's the process by which the bylaws can be amended at future town meetings?
yeah,
I think
that has
that's
not yet
important.
been, that has not yet been discussed or finalized by the group, so feel free to raise suggestions about that in your small group.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, everyone.
What I am going to move us to getting into those breakout rooms. What's going to happen is you're going to get a pop-up on your screen that says go to breakout rooms. You're going to head there. If you're having trouble, just hang on a sec. We'll get you where you need to go. Once you're there, like Stacy said, you're going to assign a facilitator and a note taker. I've enabled screen sharing. So if you would like to share your screen with the document we put in the chat, feel free. If you are a scribe and you want to take handwritten notes, that's totally fine as well, but we will ask you to type those after the meeting. And if you have any tech issues or anything like that, there's a function where you can call one of us to the room and we'll come and help, but just be patient as we get everyone where they need to go. Okay, here we go. Laura and David, let me know if you're having any trouble getting into the room.
Welcome back. Everybody is being yanked out of their rooms mid-sentence or not. Here you are, coming back. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the main room. I apologize if you were interrupted mid-sentence or word. That's the fun of breakout groups on Zoom. But we hope that everybody had really good conversations. I got to jump around into rooms a little bit and listen in, and really appreciated hearing just the level of inquiry and curiosity, as well as people really just talk about their experiences and their views. So thank you all for that. Here's what stands between you and the rest of your evening. We are going to put up a poll. And as I said earlier, and if you missed it, I'll repeat, right? This is not a scientific survey. No one should think these results are what the vote's gonna be at any town meeting, right? We've got a mix of town meeting voters and not town meeting voters, and we've got a self-selected group here. So that is not the purpose of this poll. We are not trying to get a scientific result, but what we are trying to get is just a sense of where people stand on things, because that's really informative to the group. So when you're ready, Semanish. You should now see a poll. There are 9 questions in your poll. They ask you about each of the provisions in the group's package, and then there's one at the end that asks you about the policy packet as a whole.
How do you know how to do this?
You should
So-
be. Go ahead.
Yeah, the poll should just pop up right on your screen. If you're on the phone, I'm not actually sure how to fill this out.
Yeah, I don't think
unfortunately,
it'll
but
work on phone.
It's
I
in
don't
your
think it,
chat. It's in your chat, everybody.
Okay,
No,
now
popped right up on the screen.
no, it's, yeah,
No.
but I
it
don't-
shouldn't be in the chat.
understand.
It should be popped up on the screen under polls and quizzes. It's called STRWB draft policy levers, and you should be able to fill it out right in front of you and then hit submit. If you're on the phone, unfortunately, you won't be able to do it, but we are sending out a form after this where you can share your opinions.
Diminish the
Okay,
submit isn't
so-
working.
On an
Might be
iPad.
because you have to vote on all of them in order
Yeah.
to submit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right, but so my question is, it has 2 circles for strongly oppose and oppose, but it doesn't have a number scale. So how do I get a scale?
it should say 1 strongly opposed, 2
Scroll down.
opposed, 3 neither oppose nor
It
support.
doesn't go down, it doesn't go left or right. It just has, do I skip it? Do I,
Um,
I'm not
Yeah.
understanding how to use this. On a scale of 1 to 5, how strongly do you support this policy lever?
Yeah.
Strongly oppose or oppose are my 2 options.
so if you
But if I
put your cursor,
strongly
o-
agree,
sure, so if you put your cursor over the policy quiz and then whatever mechanism you use to usually scroll on your computer or
oh,
tablet.
I see,
if you
I'm
want.
on I get it. I'm on an iPad, so I don't have a mouse,
Okay,
an
can you,
external
can you scroll with your finger?
controller. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything.
All
I
right.
just, I, on the other hand, just filled it out and submitted it and it said it wouldn't submit. It was an error.
You have to answer all of the questions.
I did.
Well, I
And
see
it's
that
disappeared off my screen.
we've got 27 responses, so I know it's working for some people.
Yeah, mine worked fine.
I think
You
if it
wanna put it-
disappeared, then you.
Put it up
submitted
again. Mine just disappeared.
Mine worked on an iPad.
Can
Yeah,
I
I'm doing it on
My
an iPad.
computer.
Can I
Yeah.
get a definition on number 7? Would it what is a dwelling unit portion or of, et cetera? What does that mean?
Okay, well, it's obvious.
That
we're not
is,
gonna-
number
Oh.
7 is just adding a definition of short-term rentals to the zoning bylaw.
Stacy,
Stacy, once we vote, are we done?
Once you vote, you are done. We do though have if, Semanis, you want to drop in the chat,
Yeah.
there's for additional feedback. So if you'd
Can you,
like to.
can you put this thing up again so I can fill it out again and see if it will go?
So I can't do that without
Sure.
ending the poll for everyone. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, and if you're having trouble, I'm happy to send you a version of this poll that you can fill out. So we
You
can.
can't
let-
tell if I've already submitted it,
Did
correct?
it on
Because
my-
I can't,
no
I
names.
And
can't-
again-
I
again-
unfortunately can't.
Yeah.
Don't worry, everyone. This is not a vote. This is just getting a temperature of the room. And if we miss some people, go and fill out the form that Semanish just dropped in the chat. If you're not able to do the survey, it's okay. It's all okay. Go ahead and feel free. If you want to submit your poll responses, you could just email them to Semanish if you prefer. Or you could go to the form and you could tell us what you prefer. And one way or another, we will make sure your voice is heard. Penelope?
Yeah, Stacy, in the future, if you do another thing like this, there were a lot of questions that were phrased as very black and white, and there's a lot of gray in the answers here. So if you could put a line for comments, it might be helpful to you to understand why somebody like me picked
Yeah.
neutral as opposed to strongly support.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's, I think, harder to do that in a Zoom poll, but it's definitely doable in your comment form. So thank you for that. All right. We have 100 people who've submitted, so we'll just give it another minute. And maybe you should mute everybody. Yeah.
And if you're done filling out the survey and you were a note taker, please send your notes to me. I will put my email in the chat.
Right.
Are you guys gonna
Okay.
post the results of the poll?
Everyone, yes. You ready? I think we've got 106 out of 106, so I think we can post it. Ready to end the poll?
Finished.
No, I'm not, no, no. No.
Okay,
Finished.
we're gonna end it.
Yeah. All right. Want to share results?
Okay, so now you should be seeing on your screen where the poll was,
This is the
the
poll.
results.
One dwelling.
Samanage, can you mute everybody?
Yes.
Poll.
Split. Not working. They're not all muting.
I'm not seeing it.
Samesh, can you send this result
Yeah.
to
Let's
us?
do that.
We will include the poll results in the meeting summary.
Yeah, it's too much to copy down a note form, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. You
Totally
will get
understand.
this, don't worry. All right. Well, thank you all very much. All our little technical glitches aside, all the note takers, please send your notes to Semanish by the end of the week. So,
You
or
mean by
by
tomorrow?
by Monday, right?
That's the beginning of the week.
Yes, by the beginning of the week. So Semanish can have a weekend. And we look forward to integrating all of your feedback. We will send you all the meeting summary when it is complete. And thank you all so much for your
Can you tell-
participation.
Can you tell us how how to send comments? Because I didn't get the email. Is there an email address?
Mhm.
Yes, it's in the,
I'll put it in the chat.
This is Anthony. I was hoping that before the end of the meeting, we would be able to make general comments, but I never got a chance to. Are we not able to do that in this meeting?
we're not, no, we're not gonna do that because we had 180 people in the room and then we'd be here for another 6
Okay.
hours.
Okay, so how about comments? Can we send comments to the study group? How do we do
Yes.
that?
Anthony, so do you have access to the chat?
The chat?
The chat
No,
within
no.
Zoom?
no, my wife put it on her phone, so I don't know. She has access to it, I guess.
Okay, we will. Samantha, just make a note to send Anthony.
Yeah, I'll reach
Um,
out to you, Anthony.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll reach out to you.
Okay, so then I can submit written comments, in other words,
You-
to the study
You
group,
can,
right?
everyone can
Okay.
submit written comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, all right, good night, everybody.
Right.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
Bye, thanks, everyone.
This is like a really horrible Little House on the Prairie thing.
Okay, ending the meeting. Bye, folks.
Thanks.